So welcome back to the Cozy Rosy Crochet channel, where today I am sharing with you the first of 12 different squares to create your own jolly holiday blanket. Now before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and of course the notification bell so that you never miss out another one of my crochet patterns or tutorials again. Now each of the squares in the jolly holiday blanket are made using filet crochet. All of the written patterns and the charts are available to view over on the website, but the good news is these videos on the YouTube to support these patterns are said in the traditional pattern writing sense. You don't have to be able to read charts and you don't have to be able to understand the open and closed blocks traditionally used for filet crochet to complete your own blanket. So the materials that I'm using for my blanket is going to be this Paintbox Yarns Simply Aran. Now this shade that I'm using is shade number 226 and it's really quite a nice green colour. It's not bright green, it's kind of a little bit muted, and I've also got a 5.5mm hook to create these squares. You can obviously go down to a 5 if your tension is a little bit loose. Now you can opt to use a smaller weight yarn to create smaller size squares and of course adjust the hook size accordingly. So my panels have worked up at 18 inches across and 14 inches down, and I'm going to be using all 12 squares in my blanket, but you can opt just to use 9 and keep Santa right at the centre. Now today's square is going to be the angel square, and there's a new square being launched each week. If you head to the link in the description box, you will find the full playlist and of course a link over to the event page where each of the squares will be highlighted and you can get a sneak peek of the other squares to come. So gather your materials and let's get started. So to start our angel with the slip knot on our hook, we're going to begin by making a chain of 66. Get your chain made and then we'll be ready to continue with the remainder of row 1. We're going to be working US double crochets and chains to create this filet crochet. The US double crochet is the same as a UK treble crochet, but I will be using US terminology throughout this pattern. We're going to be starting by working 1 double crochet, that's a US double crochet, into that 4th chain from hook. So we yarn over the hook, there's our first chain. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. We yarn over and we're going to insert just underneath that top loop of our chain. Now because these are going to be joined and there's going to be a border going around our blanket, it leaves us the remainder of the chain to join them and create a nice edging too. Once you've inserted your hook into that top of your chain, we're going to yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So our skipped chains here count as our first double crochet and we've just worked our second. For the remainder of row 1, we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each chain across. So we yarn over and insert into the next chain. We yarn over, ready to work into the next chain. Continue to work across, working 1 double crochet into each chain across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 1 where your stitch count will be 64 double crochets, including those 3 skipped chains. I'll see you in a moment once you've worked your beginning row. I'm just working my final stitch into my chain, and if we uncurl it, we should now have a stitch count of 64, including those skipped chains at the beginning, and that marks the end of row 1. Going into row 2, we're going to be starting our filet crochet pattern, and I'm going to be giving you this in just plain instructions, not actually in the filet crochet style. Remember, you can find both the chart and the blocks as they're written over on the website, but this video is just being given to you in a normal pattern format. So row 2 begins with a turning chain of 3. Now that turning chain counts as the first stitch of our first block and it counts as a double crochet. Remembering that filet crochet is worked in blocks of 3, well 4 This is where it gets confusing with filet, which is why we're just doing it in the most basic of styles today. But you can find out more, as always, in the description box and over on the website as well. Once we've worked that chain of 3, which counts as our first double crochet, we're going to skip that stitch underneath our chain 3 because that counts, and we're going to work into the next stitch. We're going to be working 1 double crochet into the next 12. So we've yarned over, ready to work into the stitch next to our chain 3. So that's number 1. And we're working 12. So that's 2, 3, and then we work number 12. Once we've worked those 12 double crochets, we then make a chain of 2. So we just yarn over and pull through twice. Now that chain 2 means that we skip the next 2 stitches and we carry on into that 3rd stitch, working 1 double crochet into the next 4 stitches. So we skip 2, then work into that 3rd one, making our double crochet, and we're working 1 double crochet into the next 4. So that's 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Once we've worked those 4 double crochets, we make our next chain of 2 and we skip the next 2 stitches, and we're repeating this again. So we skip 2 and into that 3rd one we work the first of 4 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we chain 2. Now we're going to repeat that 4 more times. So we skip 2, work 1 double crochet into the next 4, chain 2, and we repeat that 4 more times, and you'll have 12 more stitches left and your chain 3, or your turning chain from the previous row. So repeat that 4 more times. So we skip 2, yarn over to work 1 double crochet into the next 4, and then we chain 2, ready to repeat it again. So we're repeating it for a total of 6 times. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 blocks of 4 with that chain 2, and I'll meet you once you've worked those. Don't forget to do your chain 2 and skip 2 in between, and you'll have 12 stitches and your last turning chain left once you've finished those repeats, and I'll meet you in a moment. So once you've done your last repeat, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 blocks of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chain 2 spaces. You will of course worked a chain 2 after that last block of 4. We skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12, and that will take us all the way up or back to our beginning turning chain. So work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 after skipping those 2, and I'll see you for our last stitch, which is worked into our turning chain. The thing to remember about filet crochet and looking at the filet crochet charts, working into your turning chain is not included on those chains. It's not included on those charts. So the final thing we do at the end of each row is we're going to work 1 double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So that in our case is the 3rd chain up. We just insert our chain. Mine gets a little bit small. So there's the back of my chain there. I'm just going to shove my hook through, making sure I've grabbed 2 loops of my chain and work that last double crochet. That really helps to keep your edges straight, making sure you work into the top of that 3rd chain. This is a little bit large, this rectangle, to fit onto my screen, but you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 chain 2 spaces and a total stitch count, including your turning chain of 3, of 64. And that's at the end of row 2. Row 3 is nice and simple. We're going to make our turning chain of 3, which does count as our first stitch and the first stitch in our block. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain a cross. Now this is really important to remember because you're going to have many chain 2 spaces throughout this pattern, and it's up to you how you work into that chain 2 space. I'm trying to work across these first stitches to reach my first chain so I can show you what I mean. So when you get to your chain 2 space, it's important to work into the top of that stitch before the chain space, and then you have the option to work into your chain or into the chain 2 space. I will be honest with you, I just work into the chain space. So I yarn over and just insert into the big hole. Now there's 2 chains here, so we have to work 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space. And you can position them out if you want to, but they will even out at the end of the project. So continue to work across, working 1 double crochet into each stitch and into the chain across. Your stitch count will remain the same because we're going to work into that turning chain at the end as always. So our stitch count will remain a total of 64 at the end of row 3, and I will meet you there. I'm just meeting you at the end of row 3 where I'm working into the top of my turning chain to place that last double crochet of the row, and our stitch count should remain as 64, remembering our turning chain counts as 1. Going into row 4, we begin with our turning chain of 3. As always, that counts as our stitch and the first stitch as our block. We're then going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches again. So that's 1, 2, 3, and that should bring us up to the edge of our previous square once we've worked those 12 double crochets. We then make our chain of 2 to create a space above our previous space and skip the next 2 stitches. We're then going to work into that 3rd stitch across, so we skip 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 34. So that's number 1, and we're working into a total of 34 stitches. So work across, and it should bring you all the way up to finish in this stitch here. So count across, making sure that you're doing a total of 34 stitches, and I'll meet you there. And 34. So we've worked all the way over to that last block. Once we've worked those 34, we make our chain of 2. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12, and then of course we work that last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So I'll meet you ready to work into our turning chain and to end row 4. Once you've worked those 12 double crochets, all that's left to do is to make sure we work into the top of our turning chain, making sure we grab 2 loops. Oh, that's tight. Working our final double crochet. Our stitch count should remain the same. We should have 64 double crochets, well, 64 stitches, remembering that each chain counts as a stitch, and that beginning chain 3 also counts as a stitch. Going into row 5, we start with our turning chain of 3, and we are repeating row 3 where we work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across to continue to maintain that same stitch count as 64. Remember, when you're working into those chain spaces, just make sure you're working 2 double crochets because there are 2 chains there. I'll see you at the end of row 5. So at the end of row 5, make sure you've worked into your turning chain. So for rows 6 to 9, we're going to be repeating rows 4 and 5 2 more times. So we're going to be repeating row 4 and row 5 2 more times, so we have a total of 9 rows. So we've currently got 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So we're going to repeat row 4 and 5 2 more times for a total of 9 rows. So continue to make those next 4 rows and I will meet you ready for row 10. Once we've worked those 9 rows, you can start to see the pattern forming. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. You should have 4 rows of these open stitches with 1 on top. Going into row 10, we begin with our chain of 3. And we work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15. 1, 2, that's 14 and 15. Now that should have meant you've worked above this block, and then we're ready to work our chain of 2, skip the next 2, working into that 3rd one across, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 28. And 28. You see we're approaching that next block there. So we're going to work our chain of 2. We skip 2 stitches, ready to work into that 3rd one. And we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches, which will leave our last stitch to go into our top of our turning chain. I'll meet you at the end of row 10. Just working my last stitch into the top of my turning chain, and you can see that our blocks are starting to come in. We're creating our angel's skirt. For row 11, we're simply going to work 1 double crochet. Well, we're going to make our turning chain of 3, and then we're going to work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. So we'll be maintaining that stitch count as always as a total of 64 stitches. Continue to work across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 11. At the end of row 11, you should still have your stitch count of 64. Going straight into row 12, we start with our turning chain of 3, and we're going to be working 1 double crochet. Oh, already yarned over. We're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 18 stitches. Once we've worked those 18 double crochets, we make our chain of 2, skip 2, and then we're ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. 22. We then make our chain of 2, skip the next 2, where we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 18 stitches. We're then of course going to work that last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So continue across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 12. So at the end of row 12, we should still have our stitch count of 64. Row 13 once again is going to be work that chain of 3 before working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. I'll meet you for row 14, where things are going to start to get a little bit more interesting. I'll see you in a moment. We're going to go straight into row 14, and just a little side note, row 15 is not working into every single stitch, so wait for me at the end of row 14, don't jump ahead. Done my turning chain of 3, and we're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. And 21. We then make our chain of 2. We then skip 2 before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 16 stitches. And 16. We chain 2, skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. where of course we'll finish up by working 1 double crochet into our turning chain. Now remember, row 15 we are not working into each stitch across, so I'm going to meet you at the end of row 14, ready for row 15, where we're going to be starting the wings of our angels. So at the end of row 14 we have made the skirt or dress for our angels, and we're going to begin row 15 ready to begin the wings. We start with a turning chain of 3 as always. We then are going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. We then make our chain of 2, skip the next 2, and then we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 46 stitches. So work across and I'll meet you for that next space after 46 stitches. And 46. We're going to make our chain of 2, skip 2 stitches before we work 1 double crochet into each of the last 6 stitches, and then of course work a final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So we now have a space for the bottom of our wings on either side of our angel. Now row 16 is possibly the busiest row when it comes to making spaces. So we're going to go through this step by step together. We make our chain of 3 and we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. That's 1, 2 and 3. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 7. So that's 1, 2 and 3, go into our chain 2 space. We're then going to work our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into the next 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to repeat that. So 1, 2, we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. That's 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2. That's what we're looking like so far. If you can see that, you should have 3 spaces so far. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. 1, 2. Once we've worked into those 10 stitches, we make a chain of 2, skip 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. That's 1, 2, 3 and 4. Chain 2, skip the next 2, ready to repeat that, working 1, 2, 3 and 4. Chain 2. We skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 7. That's 1. 5 and 6 go into that chain 2 space, and then number 7. So we've repeated the pattern on both sides. We then make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the last 3 stitches. we make our final double crochet into the top of our turning chain of 3 to complete row 16. So again, it's always too wide on my screen, ever so slightly. Go back a little bit. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 spaces and still have your stitch count of 64. Going into row 17, we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 go into our chain 2 space, and 6. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 13. So that's 2, just working number 13. We make our chain of 2. We then skip 2 before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 16 stitches. 2 and 16. We make our chain of 2 before working, skipping 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 13 stitches. That's 2 and 3. Once we've worked those 13, we chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 6. That's 2 and 3, 4, 5, number 6, and of course we need to work that last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So at the end of row 17, these wings are really coming in, and we're going to go straight into row 18. We make our turning chain of 3. We're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3. So that's 1, 2 and 3. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet to the next 19. There's number 19. We then chain 2. So for row 18 it's a little bit different here. We're doing 1 open block after another. So we skip 2, work 1 double crochet into the next. We then chain 2 again, work skipping 2, and then we're ready to work 1 double crochet into the next 4 stitches. That's 1, 2, 3 and 4. We'll make those chain of 2, we skip 2, 1 double crochet, we chain 2, skip 2, working 1 double crochet into the next 19. So that was, before we carry on, I'm going to show you what that looks like, because it is a little bit different. So you've got an open block, closed block, open block, open block, and then we're carrying on here. That was number 1, and we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 19. So that was 1, 2 and 3 go into that open block or into those chains, and we're carrying on until we have a total of 19 stitches. Just working number 19 here. We do our chain of 2, skip 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3. which brings us to our turning chain where we work our last double crochet. So the most important bit on this row is definitely those 2 open blocks next to each other. So going into row 19, we start with our turning chain of 3 and we're ready for another busy row. We're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So that's 2 and 3. We then chain 2. Skip the chain 2 space, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 16 stitches. So that's 1, 2 and 16. We chain 2. So we skip 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into the next 7. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. We chain 2 and we repeat that again, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 7 again. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've worked over those spaces there this time. If I straighten that out, it will look a bit better. There we go. We then make our chain of 2 before we skip the next 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 16. That's 2, 3. Once we've worked those 16, we make our chain of 2, skipping that chain 2 space, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3. And of course, we're ending our row working 1 final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So we've covered up those spaces and added a middle one there for row 19. Row 20 is another busy one, but it will get easier very soon. So we're going to start row 20 with our chain of 3. And we begin by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. That's 1, 2 and 6. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. So that's 2, 3. Once we've worked those 10, we make our chain of 2, ready to work, skipping the next 2, ready to work, 1 double crochet into each of the next 7. That's 3 and 7. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work, 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. So that's 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, we skip the next 2, ready to work, 1 double crochet into each of the next 7 once again. That's 2, 3 and 6 and number 7. We chain 2, skip the next 2, ready to work, 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. That's 3 and 10. We make our chain of 2, skip the next 2, ready to work, 1 double crochet into the next 6. That's 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and of course we're working that last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. It's hard to see the pattern coming out when you're looking at it at this angle, but if you look down, you'll see how beautiful these wings are turning out already. Row 21 is our second from last busy row, shall we say. I'm starting row 21 with my turning chain of 3. We then work 1 double crochet into each of the next 6, 5 and 6. We chain 2, so we're skipping that chain 2 space, and then we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 7. That's 1, 2, 3 and 7. We chain 2, so we're going to repeat that 7 and then that chain 2 again. That's 1, 2 and 7. We chain 2. So you've got 7, chain 2, 7, chain 2. We then skip 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 10. We then chain 2. We're going to skip 2 and work 1 double crochet into the next 7. So that's number 7. We chain 2, skip 2 again, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 7 again. 3, that's number 7. We chain 2, skip the chain 2 space, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 6. That's 1, 2 and oops, where's number 6 gone? 6, working of course our final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. I only picked up 1 loop there. There we go. So at the end of row 21, we have a similar number of spaces, they're just spaced out differently once again. Remember, you can always compare your picture that you're making to the picture that's available on the website as well, if you can't quite see exactly where I've placed mine. We're going into row 23. We're obviously starting with our turning chain of 3. We're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3. So that's 1, 2 and 3. We chain 2, we skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into the next 4. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 13. So that's 2, 3, 13. We chain 2. Once we've worked those 13, we make our chain of 2, skip the chain 2 space, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. And 10. We chain 2, skip that chain 2 space, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 13. That's 2, 3 and 13. We chain 2, skip 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. We chain 2, skip 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the last 3. And of course we work our final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. That was the last of the busy rows, I assure you. So we're going to go straight into row 24. We start with our turning chain of 3. We work 1 double crochet into each of the next 6. That's 1, 2 and 6. We chain 2, skip those next 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 46. That's 2, 3 and 46. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the last 6. That's 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, working of course 1 final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. Oh, that was a nice easy row, wasn't it, in comparison? Going into row 25, start with our turning chain of 3. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 24. So that's 1, 2 and 24. We then chain 2, skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. 2. Once you've worked those 10, we make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 24, which will take us to the end of our row, ready to work our last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. Continue across and I'll meet you at the end of this row. Seems so easy now, doesn't it, in comparison? Going into row 26, we start with our turning chain of 3. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 27. And 27. We chain 2 and we're going to skip the next 2, working 1 double crochet into the next. We chain 2 again, skip 2, work 1 double crochet into the next. We chain 2, skip 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 27. So I'm just going to work my first one so I can show you that you should have 3 open blocks in a row there. And then we've worked that first one, ready to work 27 to the end basically. So that's 3 and 4. We're going to continue to work across all the way to the end. There should be 27, and then of course you work that final double crochet into the top of your turning chain. So continue to work across and I'll meet you at the end of row 26. So you can see we've just finished off our angel's head in row 26. 27 is one of those really easy rows. We're simply going to make a chain of 3 and work 1 double crochet into each stitch across. We're nearly there. We've only got a few more rows to go to complete our angel square. So continue to work across, working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain space, and I will meet you at the end of row 27. Look how pretty she is. So we're going to go straight into row 28. Of course, you've worked that final double crochet into your previous turning chain, just on my turning chain of 3. And then we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches. And 30. We then make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches, which is going to take us all the way back to the end of our row, where of course we're going to work one last final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. Keep working across for row 28 and I will meet you for row 29. Can you work out what we're putting above the angel's head? We are working on her halo at the moment. Going straight into row 29, we're going to start with our turning chain of 3. We then work 1 double crochet into each of the next 27 stitches. That's 1, 2. We then chain 2. Skip 2, working 1 double crochet into the next 4. That's 1, 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, skipping 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 27, which will take us back to our turning chain where we'll work 1 final double crochet. Continue to work across and I shall meet you at the end of row 29 to work our final row of this pattern. I've just reached the end of row 29. I've worked into my turning chain, making that final chain 3 for our final row, and this is a very nice easy one. We're basically repeating row 28, so we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches. There's number 30. We chain 2, skip 2, and then we're working all the way back to the beginning of our row, or the end of our row should I say, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches. Well, I would love to know how you've gotten on following this pattern in this format. I hope it's gone well, because all the videos are going to be in this easiest format of simply working the stitches without having to worry about the opened and closed blocks to create these beautiful images, so that we can go ahead and make our very own jolly holiday blanket. Without finishing this row, I'm just going to have a bit of a look at our beautiful angel, and I think she's an absolutely stunning specimen of an angel, and I like how subtle this pattern is going to be. It's going to be Christmassy without kind of shouting about it, which is not my style actually. I really do love Christmas and I like it gaudy and red and green and as traditional as it gets, but I really do love the simplicity of how these squares or these blanket elements will work up. So make sure you've hit the subscribe button, of course, because I don't want you missing out on the next video. All the videos are going to be releasing on a Friday. You can always find the written patterns and of course the charts themselves over on the website. Do come and join the community group, which is linked below in the description box, and of course give this a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this tutorial. I will see you in the next video.